And welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Dean Obeidallah, and today we're joined by Congressman Mark Pocan, a Democrat from Wisconsin's 2nd Congressional District. He's co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, co-chair of the LGBT Equality Caucus, and is on the House Committee on Appropriations. Congressman Pocan, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. Glad to be here.
So we're in the midst of a spectacle on Capitol Hill right now. You have the Michael Cohen testimony going forward. And I just want to touch on this. Would have this happened if the Republicans stayed in power, or is the fact that we're actually having oversight of the Trump administration a testament to all the hard work that all of us did to win the House back in 2018?
Yeah, this is one of the big side effects of changing the majority of Congress. My last 2 years, I was so frustrated with Paul Ryan for completely giving up his responsibility as a co-equal but separate branch of government to do oversight. There was none, zero, that was done by the Republicans from a president who clearly was flailing in a lot of different areas. And now that Democrats are in charge, not only can we put legislation on the floor this week on gun violence prevention and on overturning the national emergency, and we have bills coming up next couple of weeks on pay equity and on cleaning up the mess in Washington and so many other issues. We're also able to do the proper oversight that has not happened for the last 2 years. So having Michael Cohen testify is one of the great side effects of people coming out and voting last November.
We're actually seeing Article 1 of the Constitution come to life the way the framers of the Constitution wanted, as opposed to what Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell have been doing for the last 2 years. So let's talk a little bit about what happened with Michael Cohen. A common theme among the Republicans today was to attack Chairman Elijah Cummings of the House Oversight Committee and other Democrats, and Hillary Clinton somehow involved because Lanny Davis, the lawyer for Michael Cohen, was a close Clinton friend. Somehow they found Michael Cohen. But isn't the truth Donald Trump in 2007 found Michael Cohen when he hired him to be executive vice president of the Trump organization?
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is the one who told us he only has the best people around him. And then he brings in Roger Stone and Michael Cohen and go down the list of, the cast, that got rejected by the Addams family. And, that's the group that, he surrounds himself with. So, Michael Cohen is probably a bit of a sketchy character, but the fact that he's telling us stuff that totally relates to other things we've heard tells me how much more true this testimony is. This is just one more person that the president surrounded himself with that now is more than willing to blow the whistle, and the Republicans just don't even know how to handle that.
In reality, people who are criminals tend to surround themselves with criminals. We see that in the real world, and I think potentially we're seeing that with Donald Trump, and you've mentioned some, and you go through the list of Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates. It's not a coincidence when you have these people. But during the testimony, I did not hear one Republican probe questions about the actual allegations of criminality that Michael Cohen's laid out about Donald Trump, from specifically like paying hush money in violation of federal election campaign laws. Everything was just attacking Michael Cohen's credibility. Isn't oversight, shouldn't they at least ask a few questions about the actual substance to see if the person in the White House is a criminal as opposed to just doing the party line?
Yeah, well, I think the Republicans are afraid they'll actually get answers, and they don't want to do that because clearly, the things that have been highlighted, when you start handing in checks that show payments from the president when he's president to Michael Cohen, or, you hear about the president, being a racist in private. Well, he's a racist in public when he fights for the wall over and over and over again and has all kinds of dog whistles at his rallies for that base of his support. None of this doesn't ring true. So, I think, when he said something about S-hole countries, well, he said that also when we all know he referred to that from other accounts from Democratic leadership. So nothing is necessarily ringing out of the ordinary, but I think to hear it firsthand from someone who's close to him just really emphasizes how strange of a time in history as this is. I can't think of another president in modern history, Democrat or Republican, that you'd be going, oh, yeah, he did that. Oh, yeah, I believe it. I mean, this is stuff that really is novel worthy.
This is the closest I would think in modern day would be John Dean testifying during Watergate against Richard Nixon. But this is even more stunning. I mean, because you have Michael Cohen opening with saying Donald Trump is a racist and a cheat, and then he goes through the criminality. I'm going to speculate here, Congressman, that you're going to begin to get more pressure from Democratic base, not just Tom Steyer, who's my friend, but other Democrats to push for impeachment, because Michael Cohen testified under oath that Donald Trump has committed various crimes, including one in office. What are you going to say to those people in Democratic base that say you should start impeachment hearings now? You should be beginning that.
Yeah, well, I voted for impeachment last session, so I know where I'm at already on this. I've seen plenty of things. But, you know, to be totally pragmatic, you're going to need Republican support to do something like this, which is why I think many in Democratic leadership have said, wait for the Mueller report. But let's remember, a lot of this oversight that now is happening because of the November elections is in areas that the Mueller report wasn't looking at. So you may even have more ammunition. So, you know, I think what we're doing is getting to the bottom of the truth in a whole bunch of different areas. The Mueller report will be a very significant part of that. But in order to actually, deal with impeachment, you're going to have to bring in Republican support. And as you could see, either from the sycophants today or the vote yesterday, where only 13 Republicans, showed that they are born with a spine on the vote on the national emergency. It's not going to be easy. And I think that's what we keep trying to tell the people who want to make sure that we're looking at doing everything we can to remove this president.
So when you get the Mueller report, do you think that's when the real push will be for potentially, depending what the Mueller report says, and we really don't know, but is that potentially when you actually have formal impeachment hearings? Like they will not happen before that report? And I'm asking you, not just you personally, but Democratic leadership in the House.
Yeah, I don't think leadership will do anything until that report's released. And even then, we may be fighting to make sure it's publicly released. There could be a lot of fights we're going to have in between now and getting to the point of even having the next discussion. But I do understand, just again, looking at that vote yesterday, there should have been more than 13 Republicans who don't want any president, Democrat or Republican, to declare a national emergency when no emergency occurs, or to steal money from defense. I mean, think about that. Almost every single Republican was okay with stealing money from defense to pay for this, imaginary wall, this campaign promise he made. Some of that money was going to housing in Wisconsin, for example.
Right.
So that told me 2 Republicans from Wisconsin did stand up out of the 13. My state delivered pretty well, but what about the other 3? I mean, Sean Duffy's fine with pulling money out of the state, Brian Stile, Glenn Grothman, and that's just Wisconsin. So, we've got our work to do yet.
And I want to touch on the national emergency vote in a second. Just this last thing about the hearing today. We heard your colleague, but on the other side of the aisle, Mark Meadows, a congressman, very conservative, attack Michael Cohen's framing of Donald Trump as a racist. In fact, it wasn't framing, it was very specific, because Donald Trump is a racist, and he went through examples. Mark Meadows said, I've met with Donald Trump over 300 times, and I've never heard him say a racist thing. And maybe we're hearing different things, Congressman, but I've heard Donald Trump call Africa S-hole countries. I've seen him retweet white supremacists. I've heard him call after Charlottesville white supremacists very fine people. I've heard him demonize Mexicans as racist, and Judge Curiel during the campaign as being unable to be the judge on his case because of his Mexican heritage, even though he's born here. Are we missing something? Is this gaslighting? Is Congressman Meadows just gaslighting us, or do they have different definitions of racism on the other side than we have?
Yeah, don't forget the Muslim ban. I mean, you go down the list, right?
Sure.
There's plenty of things that this president does. I don't think a week goes by, and I might argue even a day or 2 goes by, that the president doesn't say something that I would consider racist. I mean, quite honestly, the wall, we know drugs aren't coming across the border. They're coming in through points of entry. We know he's lying about all these things, but the only reason he wants a wall is because on the other side, there are people who have a little browner skin than him. And he's appealing to the racists in this country. So if Mark Meadows doesn't hear it, I would say Mark Meadows may have a problem, not the rest of us, because, I just always abhor when the president goes to that level, because we are such, I think, a great country. And, he may have 35% support. But the good news, Dean, is every time I subtract 35 from 100, I get 65%. And then all you need is 50% plus 1. So I still have a lot of faith in the country. But this president certainly, plays race more than anyone I've seen.
And to any of my fellow progressives who get nervous about 2020, I mean, 2018 is a lesson for us, right, Congressman? That if we come out, we win. We won in record numbers. The House, we flipped 7 governorships, including your home state of Wisconsin, which we've talked about in the past. So if we come out, we can win in 2020 the same way, despite Donald Trump's tweet saying he's going to win big.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm encouraged about is, when you look at all the 2020 candidates, they're fighting over who can get out for Medicare for all first, or debt-free college first, or a Green Deal, new Green Deal, and it's great. They're all fighting on progressive issues, and I think that's a good thing because we know that the public supports all of those issues. So, I'm very encouraged by what I see heading into 2020, and I think we just have to realize we took the House, we can take the Senate, we can take the White House in 2020.
And what do you say, because 2020 is here, we're in the midst of this right now, and the first debate's a few months away, and accidentally I turn on Fox News sometimes, or I'll see clips online, everything about us is that we're a socialist, we're even communist now. Do you recommend that Democrats running for president even address what socialism is, because what we want is not socialism, or is there a way to push back, or should just ignore it?
Right now, I would say ignore it. I hope they're doing some focus groups on this because clearly the Republicans, because they don't really stand for much, they try to find words, right? So Frank Luntz gets the little dials on Fox and they try to scare people on things. Personally, I don't think they're winning on this, especially among younger voters. They're certainly not winning on these issues. But you're right. There's a theme from when Congresswoman Cheney, on the day we got sworn in, brought up socialism. The president's bringing it up. They're trying to find an issue. But, I would argue, you look at Bernie Sanders, and I really give a lot of credit to Bernie because when he ran for president 4 years ago, he ran on all these issues. And people said, oh, those are kind of extreme issues. Those are the mainstream issues that people support in poll after poll after poll. And maybe people who live in the Beltway or work in the Beltway, who spend way too much time with a bunch of K Street lobbyists, and maybe don't talk to real people around the country, don't realize that if you don't have health care for your family, that's your national emergency, right?
Yep.
And, we're talking about issues that really connect with them. So I'm not too worried about the narrative they're using right now. I think we should just continue being out there on progressive issues that people agree with us on. And I think if we're authentic and honest, it's what people are desperate for, we're going to be best off.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. So you touched on the vote Tuesday on the National Emergency Act and the idea of nullifying Donald Trump's fake emergency. Only 13 Republicans, though, in the House joined the Democrats in nullifying the emergency. Were you surprised? Did you expect more Republicans would stand with our Constitution over Donald Trump?
No, I ran into one person in particular, and he did vote with us. And I was trying to approach him on another issue, to be perfectly honest. And, there are Republicans generally, when you talk to individually, who don't like what this administration is doing. They know it's divisive. They know it's not done for the reasons being presented. But I was really disappointed. I honestly thought 60 people might vote with us yesterday because, if they really care about this issue, in 2020, if we elect Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or someone else who decides to declare a national emergency on health care or on gun violence prevention or on the environment and climate change, then they're going to be all bent out of shape. But now they've allowed it to happen under this president when there's nothing behind it. At least these other issues I mentioned, you could argue, are really an emergency. And, I was surprised that more people don't have a courage of their convictions. Maybe that's why, as a party, they're losing so many seats. But I think people want that authenticity. I mean, just say, look, this isn't right no matter who does it. And 13 Republicans had courage, and another, almost 200 did not.
Well, under the terms of the National Emergency Act, the next 18 days, the Senate is mandated. They have to vote on this. Mitch McConnell cannot stop it. So far, 3 Republican senators have publicly said they're going to join with the Democrats. That means one more has to at least get it to Trump's desk. Have you heard anything more? Do you get a sense that perhaps we'll get that 4th, maybe even more Republicans? Because many are on the fence. They're just not telling us how they're going to vote.
Yeah, no, I have not, because that just happened yesterday in the House. I would assume that if, people are really voting from their conviction, you could find more. But who knows? I mean, these are weird times here these days. Everyone's afraid of a Republican primary and the Tea Party. And, you watch Mitch McConnell, look how afraid he is of his constituents because he's up in 2020 that he sits kowtows to the president. Look at Lindsey Graham, who once stood up and was clearly disgusted by the president. Now, he's the lapdog for the president. So anyone who's up in 2020 seems to be afraid of their shadow.
So, you've got, tied to this emergency, you have the president, Donald Trump, sending a whole bunch of National Guard troops down to the border. I saw, though, you were touting your governor in Wisconsin who's pulled the troops out. So why is that a good move? Why did you praise that?
Yeah, I criticized Scott Walker when he did it because it was stupid, but I've come to expect that sometimes from Scott Walker. But it was such a stupid show. Why would you take, National Guard has very important responsibilities and potential responsibilities, and this was not one of them. And to take people and separate them from their family and from their jobs. Don't forget, most people in the National Guard, they're in the National Guard, but they work full-time jobs.
Sure. When
you just put people down there for a political purpose to try to, justify the wall, you're hurting the employers and you're hurting the families. And there was really no justification. And yet they're not doing some of the jobs that need to be done because that's not under their purview. And from the reports we had, I think it wasn't fair to use the National Guard in that way. And in fact, I talked to our National Guard leader just 2 weeks ago about this very issue. So I was really glad to see Tony Evers join Michelle Lujan Grisham down in New Mexico in saying, no more. I mean, we're not going to disrespect our state residents for something that's really a political purpose.
And Congressman, we've been talking a lot about the progressive agenda of our party. One of the big things that you've been championing is a $15 minimum wage on a national level, not state by state. Yesterday, Ivanka Trump said people want to work for what they get. So I think that the idea of a guaranteed minimum is not something most people want. Do you think most Americans don't want a guaranteed minimum wage in this country?
You could only be the daughter of a father who got millions from his daddy to be that out of touch with reality. I mean, almost every constituent, literally, I think I'd be at 99.9% of my constituents wish they could make more money, right? And are willing to work hard to make more money. And, to think that at $735, $15,000 a year, you can work full time. In Madison, Wisconsin, in my district, I think you have to work 83 hours a week at minimum wage to afford an average 2-bedroom apartment in Madison, much less all the other expenses that you might have. So, that's just the reality of someone who's so out of touch that, when grandpas give daddies millions of dollars and then you have your designer company and all that kind of stuff, you're not living in a real world, right? And the people I represent are in the real world, and they're desperate to get a wage boost so that they can support their families better. And don't forget, there's a ripple effect on minimum wage. Every time we raise the minimum wage in Wisconsin, more people entered the workforce. We've seen that, if you get some extra money in your paycheck, you're going to go to a movie, you're going to go to dinner, you might buy that new sofa. If you're one of those billionaires, that 1% that got all the money on the Republican tax cut, you can buy a hell of a nice sofa. But that doesn't counter 1,000 people buying a sofa and what that does for the economy. So if you lift the wages, you literally are lifting the economy from the very bottom up. So there's many reasons why it makes sense. I would also argue for employers and other reasons. There's a good, I as an employer for over 30 years, when I don't have to constantly retrain new people, that's good for me and for my customers. And when you pay people better, they're less likely to leave, and that's good for everyone. So there's so many reasons on this. You really have to be like a U.S. chamber, paid lobbyist to actually truly think this is a bad idea.
Or Trump, because it's always nice when the wealthy tell the working class in this country, you make enough money, you don't need a raise, but we're going to have a tax cut to all of our big donors. So, and the last time the minimum wage was raised in this country is 2009. So it's been sitting around, and the actual value of it today is around $6 compared to when it was in 2009. So it is an issue, and I hope Democrats, and I think they're going to champion on a national level. So you've been fighting, and we've talked about this before, Congressman, with ICE. You sent a Freedom of Information Act request. You actually went to the ICE and handed out flyers. Tell us what's going on, what you want ICE to give you, and as a member of Congress, you still can't get them to respond.
Yeah, so back in late September, ICE did a raid in Wisconsin, arrested 83 people, including about 20 in Dane County, the biggest county in my district. And they didn't notify law enforcement properly, even though they knew how to. They purposely did it, to not be honest, and they've not coordinated or cooperated with local elected officials, including the mayor of Madison. So they did this arrest. They put out a press release with 4 people. They were bad people. They should be deported. But what about the other 79? They clearly have the information. So all we said is don't give us the names because there's privacy reasons, but just tell us each offense of the other 79 people. They had it 24 hours after they arrested people. And I have now waited 138 days, I believe it is, for this. I made an open records request on October 12th. They asked for an extension. We gave it to them. They asked for a second extension. We gave it to them. They wanted more. We said no. And now I've been waiting and waiting. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I went there myself to go find the head of ICE to see if I get the info. He was not available. They told me they'd get back to me. I waited, I think, 2 more weeks, got no information. So I put up little handouts that said missing. And I had my Freedom of Information Act request. And I asked people if they could put it by the water cooler or the coffee machine, because maybe someone would find it and answer my Freedom of Information Act request. But obviously I did it, for a little drama to emphasize a point. A federal agency cannot completely ignore lawmakers, much less a lawmaker on appropriations that provides their funding, because they just don't want to share it with us. That's not appropriate for the public, for the media, and certainly not for elected officials in Congress.
Hey, think about it. ICE is not being responsive to you. You're a member of Congress. What about the average citizen who might want to know what's going on with a family member, a loved one, a friend who ICE has taken into custody, and they can't find that information out? So it's only troubling, and that adds to the drumbeat of people on the left being concerned about ICE. I don't know. Is there any way? Can you subpoena it? Can you threaten their appropriations? You are in appropriations. The Democrats do have the House now.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely hire a lawyer. One of the things is I'm trying not to waste tax dollars and resources,
Fair
right?
enough.
So we're going to keep pushing this a little more and a little more, and we're going to find other creative ways. I guarantee I'm not going to be on the Christmas card list of the director of ICE by the time this is all done. But he can also just do his job and get me the damn information, and then we'll be fine. But I know of people that were arrested from attorneys in my community who had no offenses. And we've always been told they go after MS-13 and bad players. ICE was created after 9/11 to protect us from domestic terrorism. And it's being misused by this president as his own personal police force in order to justify the wall. And if you're arresting people who've done nothing wrong in my community, I need to know that. And they won't share it with the mayor of Madison. They told him he's not getting the info. They lied to our law enforcement. And I'm going to keep fighting it, because you cannot be a rogue agency and get away with it. And I also happen to be able to maybe affect their purse strings. But we're going to keep doing lots on this, Dean. I'll keep you posted.
Please
I'm one of those people that if I grab onto the ankle, I'm not letting go. I'm not letting go on this one.
Well, Congressman Pocan, keep up the great fight. You're doing a great job. You're biting people by the ankles. You're grabbing their legs, whatever it takes to make things change in Washington. We need it. So, Congressman, it's been a pleasure to spend time with you. I look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dean. Really appreciate it.
Take care.